Before the Crusades erupted across Europe and the Middle East, daily life for ordinary people in the late 11th century was unimaginably harsh. A relentless grind where survival was never guaranteed, and every day brought new challenges that would test both physical endurance and mental resilience. The world of peasants and common folk was dominated by agriculture, where from the moment the sun rose, laborers would toil in fields with primitive tools made of wood and iron, plowing uneven land, sowing grain, and tending to livestock, often in the rain, mud, or under an unforgiving sun, with blistered hands and aching backs. And even a small failure, whether a crop destroyed by drought, flood, or pestilence, could mean hunger or death for one's family. A precarious existence made more treacherous by the rudimentary diet that consisted primarily of coarse rye or barley bread, watery gruels, and, if fortunate, occasional scraps of cheese, eggs, or meat, which were rare luxuries rather than staples, leaving most people malnourished and vulnerable to disease. Sanitation was almost non-existent, with open pits or rivers serving as latrines and drinking water often contaminated, leading to frequent outbreaks of dysentery, typhoid, and other deadly illnesses, while smallpox, influenza, and plague lurked in the background, ready to claim lives indiscriminately, making survival to adulthood a challenge that required both luck and resilience. As infant and child mortality rates were extraordinarily high, and the death of siblings or parents was tragically common, shaping every individual's understanding of the fragility of life from an early age. Beyond the physical hardships, the social and political landscape imposed further constraints. As Europe was a patchwork of feudal systems in which peasants owed service, labor, and taxes to their local lord, often working long hours on land that they did not own and living in constant fear of punishment or eviction for failing to meet their obligations, while the church held enormous influence, dictating moral and spiritual life, enforcing religious conformity, and inspiring both devotion and terror, with sermons warning of eternal damnation for the smallest sins, pilgrimages that demanded time and resources, and tithes that drained already meager incomes, all of which reinforced the rigid hierarchy and limited personal freedom. Women faced particularly oppressive circumstances, confined largely to domestic labor, childbearing, and service to their families or the Lord's household, with little legal protection and constant vulnerability to violence, illness during childbirth, or economic exploitation. While education was a luxury reserved for a tiny elite, and literacy among commoners was almost non-existent, meaning that knowledge of the outside world, political developments, or even basic survival information was transmitted orally through local traditions, folklore, and religious instruction, creating a culture that prized obedience and repetition over critical thought or innovation. Against this backdrop of endemic hardship, the call for the Crusades would emerge as both a religious and political catalyst, promising spiritual rewards such as indulgences and salvation, while masking the brutal realities of war, displacement, and exposure to unfamiliar and hostile environments. Peasants and lesser nobility were encouraged, or in some cases coerced, to take up the cross and march to distant lands to reclaim holy sites, leaving behind familiar villages, crops, and families to confront not only armed opponents but also the merciless forces of climate, disease, hunger, and logistical chaos. Where armies moved slowly, supplies ran low, and thousands perished from exposure, starvation, or infection long before encountering combat. And those who survived found themselves navigating unfamiliar cultures, languages, and terrains, facing both military opposition and local populations who were often equally desperate and unyielding. Life in Europe itself offered little preparation for such trials. As infrastructure was rudimentary, roads were treacherous, bridges scarce, and travel was dangerous due to bandits, wild animals, and disease, making even a short journey a significant undertaking. Clothing was minimal, providing limited protection against cold winters or torrid summers, and homes, typically simple wooden or thatched structures, offered only partial shelter from the elements, subject to fire, decay, and infestation, while livestock, which were crucial for plowing, food, and transport, were constantly threatened by disease, predators, and theft. The psychological toll was equally severe, as people were raised under constant awareness of mortality, social expectation, and divine scrutiny, with fear and superstition shaping almost every aspect of life. From interpreting natural phenomena as omens to strictly adhering to ritual practices intended to appease God and avoid calamity, all of which reinforced the pervasive sense that life was both fragile and morally precarious. Yet, within this unforgiving environment, communities adapted, developing social bonds, oral traditions, and shared practices that allowed some measure of stability, humor, and human connection. Though these moments of relief were fleeting and often overshadowed by the overwhelming demands of survival, understanding this baseline of hardship illuminates why the additional pressures imposed by the Crusades were so extraordinary, as ordinary individuals were expected to endure long marches, face armed combat, survive sieges, and confront death on a scale and frequency utterly alien to their daily experience, with success dependent not only on personal fortitude but also on hierarchy, strategy, and sheer luck, highlighting a stark reality. Enduring a single day in the age before the Crusades was already a feat of resilience, and those called to participate in holy wars faced an exponentially more brutal and unforgiving world, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Every misstep could bring starvation, disease, or execution, and every encounter with the unfamiliar weather in terms of terrain, culture, or combat presented a profound and potentially fatal challenge to even the most robust of individuals, demonstrating in unflinching terms why modern sensibilities struggle to grasp the endurance, adaptability, and courage required to survive in this era, and why imagining a single day in such a life is enough to make one reconsider assumptions about comfort, security, and human resilience, as it was a world in which suffering, risk, and mortality were constants, and the so-called mundane realities of everyday existence were already extraordinary tests of human strength and perseverance. As the 11th century drew to a close, the call for the Crusades resonated across Europe, reaching peasants, artisans, and minor nobles alike, and it was a summons that blended religious zeal, political ambition, and social pressure into a potent force that few could resist without consequence. The Pope promised spiritual salvation, the forgiveness of sins, and the eternal favor of God for those who would take up the cross and march toward the Holy Land. Yet the reality that awaited these participants was far removed from the sacred visions and grandiose sermons that framed the campaign in idealistic terms. For what was often depicted as a noble pilgrimage became a grueling test of endurance, exposing untrained individuals to the full spectrum of human suffering and the capriciousness of fortune. While their familiar lives of hard but predictable labor were replaced by weeks or months of unpredictable hardship, exposure, and moral ambiguity, nobles rode with their retinues, armored and provisioned, but for common foot soldiers, the journey was perilous, requiring them to carry all their possessions, march across difficult terrain, and endure hunger, thirst, and extreme weather, with minimal shelter and constant risk of robbery, starvation, or disease. And even the most mundane elements of travel became life-threatening, from river crossings to treacherous mountain paths, while logistical failures left thousands stranded or dead, revealing the brutal inefficiency and chaos of medieval military organization. The psychological strain of leaving home was compounded by the need to reconcile spiritual motivation with the stark reality of violence, as men who were peasants, farmers, and tradesmen were suddenly thrust into the role of combatants, forced to reconcile their faith-driven purpose with the moral challenges of killing, plundering, and witnessing atrocities on both sides of the conflict. Letters and accounts from the time reveal the fear, uncertainty, and disorientation experienced by those marching into the unknown as they confronted foreign lands, unfamiliar customs, and linguistic barriers, which magnified feelings of isolation and vulnerability, while disease spread rapidly among tightly packed groups, with dysentery, scurvy, and fevers claiming countless lives before any battle had been fought. Supply lines were notoriously unreliable, and the sheer scale of movement required to transport tens of thousands of men, horses, and equipment over long distances often resulted in hunger, dehydration, and exposure, while local populations sometimes viewed these armies with suspicion or hostility, adding the risk of ambush or theft, and forcing crusaders to rely on foraging, which was as much a test of cunning as survival skill, yet frequently resulted in conflict, theft, or brutal reprisals. Those who survived the journey faced not only physical exhaustion, but the emotional toll of witnessing death and suffering daily, from fallen comrades to the devastation of foreign towns caught in the crossfire of advancing armies, challenging their spiritual resolve and testing the very beliefs that had motivated them to embark on the campaign. Beyond the journey itself, the Crusaders had to contend with extreme environmental challenges, as climates varied drastically across Europe and the Middle East, from freezing mountain passes to sweltering deserts, requiring adaptation to clothing, diet, and hydration that many were unprepared for, and exposing them to heat stroke, frostbite, often compounded by inadequate nutrition and poor sanitation, with the spread of lice, fleas, and other parasites contributing to the deterioration of physical and mental health, while fatigue from marching dozens of miles a day left even the strongest individuals vulnerable to injury, exhaustion, or death, making each day a calculated battle against the elements. Terrain, and their own bodily limitations. Logistics of medieval warfare compounded the difficulty, as armies required immense amounts of food, water, and equipment. Yet transport was primitive and supply chains unreliable. So soldiers and support personnel often scavenged, bartered, or stole provisions, forcing moral compromises and social friction within units. While the rigid hierarchy of feudal military organization meant that many decisions were imposed by commanders whose understanding of local conditions was limited, creating tension, resentment, and opportunities for catastrophe. And those who questioned orders risked punishment or execution, reinforcing obedience, but at the cost of individual safety and morale. The Crusades were also a lesson in cultural collision, as Europeans encountered entirely different social, political, and religious landscapes. From the fortified cities of the Middle East to nomadic tribes along key trade routes, and these interactions often sparked misunderstanding, conflict, or violence, while also exposing the Crusaders to innovations in siegecraft, medicine, and commerce that challenged their preconceived notions and forced adaptation, though few were prepared to assimilate such knowledge in the midst of survival struggles. The combination of exposure, combat, hunger, and disease created an environment in which personal valor, luck, and endurance determined survival more than piety or faith, highlighting the harsh discrepancy between religious rhetoric and lived reality. Furthermore, the human cost was staggering. Chroniclers and modern historians alike record the thousands who perished from starvation, dehydration, fever, or simple exhaustion. And even those who survived faced permanent disability, trauma, or illness. While the psychological burden of participating in massacres, witnessing atrocities, and navigating ethical dilemmas in morally ambiguous circumstances left scars that could not easily be healed, creating a generation of men whose faith, courage, and resilience were tested beyond any conceivable measure. The allure of glory, spiritual reward, or material gain was tempered by the harsh, unrelenting reality that survival required unceasing vigilance, ingenuity, and endurance, and that every day carried the potential for sudden, irreversible tragedy, making it clear that the journey itself was as formidable as the battles that lay ahead, and that modern individuals, accustomed to comfort, safety, and predictable routines, would find even a single day of this expedition overwhelming, both physically and mentally, underscoring the extraordinary resilience required to embark on such a campaign and survive long enough to witness its consequences firsthand. A resilience that was demanded not by choice, but by the inexorable pressures of religious expectation, social hierarchy, and political obligation, and that illuminated in stark terms the vast gulf between modern life and the medieval world, a world in which every step, meal, and night's rest was fraught with peril. Every decision carried profound risk, and every day represented a battle against forces far beyond the control of the individual. A reality that only intensifies the sense of wonder and horror when considering why even one day in this era would be more grueling than many modern people could imagine enduring. Upon arrival in the Levant, the Crusaders were confronted with a reality far harsher and more complex than anything promised by sermons or tales of divine glory. The fortified cities and towns they sought to capture were often surrounded by thick walls, guarded by well-trained soldiers, and supported by supplies that far outstripped the limited provisions the Crusaders had brought with them, forcing armies to engage in protracted sieges that tested endurance, strategy, and morale to their utmost limits, with starvation, disease, and exposure often claiming more lives than enemy combat, as the confined spaces of siege camps became breeding grounds for dysentery, scurvy, fever, and lice, while the constant threat of attack, bombardment, or infiltration kept men in a state of perpetual alertness, robbing them of rest and eroding mental resilience. The monotony of waiting, punctuated by sudden, terrifying bursts of violence, created an environment of extreme psychological strain, as individuals confronted both the horror of battlefield casualties and the ethical dilemmas posed by war, such as the indiscriminate killing of civilians, looting, or the harsh treatment of prisoners, challenging the spiritual justifications that had initially motivated their participation. Combat itself was chaotic, brutal, and profoundly dehumanizing, far removed from the romanticized notion of knightly duels or heroic valor. Infantrymen faced the terrifying reality of clashing against shield walls, archers, cavalry charges, and siege engines, often poorly trained, poorly equipped, and outnumbered, while the noise, stench, and carnage of battle overwhelmed the senses, leaving men disoriented, injured, and often near death within moments of engagement, with injuries such as broken limbs, deep cuts, burns, or puncture wounds commonly proving fatal due to lack of effective medical care. Unsanitary conditions and infections, and even minor wounds could spiral into life-threatening afflictions, while those who survived witnessed friends, comrades, and family members maimed or killed, creating deep emotional trauma compounded by exhaustion, hunger, and exposure to harsh climates. Horses, essential for mobility and combat, were equally vulnerable to fatigue, injury, and disease, and their loss not only hindered military effectiveness, but also removed the comfort, speed, and prestige that cavalry provided, forcing armies to adapt constantly under duress. The strategies and tactics employed in these campaigns required ingenuity, but also exposed participants to extreme risk, as storming city walls, constructing siege engines, tunneling, or attempting to breach gates often resulted in catastrophic casualties, and failure could mean starvation or capture, while commanders relied heavily on the loyalty, obedience, and courage of their men, leaving little room for hesitation or dissent, with disobedience or perceived cowardice punishable by death, creating an environment of fear and relentless pressure. Simultaneously, supply shortages forced armies into morally and physically compromising situations, scavenging local villages, requisitioning food from civilians, or negotiating with distant allies for provisions, all of which could lead to tension, resentment, and outright conflict, both within the crusading forces and with local populations, who sometimes resisted violently or retreated, leaving devastation in their wake, creating a cycle of suffering that affected both conquerors and conquered alike. The toll on human life was staggering, with chroniclers recording the death of thousands from starvation, disease, and exposure even before the first sword was drawn, highlighting that the true danger of the Crusades was not merely enemy combat, but the intersection of harsh climate, logistical failure, and relentless physical and psychological strain. Men suffered from frostbite, sunstroke, dehydration, heat exhaustion, exhaustion-induced collapses, and infections that modern medicine would easily treat, but which were virtually untreatable at the time. While the ever-present threat of ambush, skirmish, or larger battle forced continual vigilance and placed immense stress on both leaders and rank-and-file soldiers, creating a persistent sense of impending death that shaped every thought, decision, and action. In addition to the physical hardships, the moral and spiritual pressures were intense, as crusaders were constantly reminded of the religious justification for their actions, encouraged to reconcile the killing of fellow humans with promises of divine favor, indulgences, and eternal salvation, and compelled to follow rituals, prayers, and confessions in an environment where survival itself was precarious, creating a cognitive dissonance that weighed heavily on many individuals, leaving them grappling with guilt, fear, and doubt even as they fought, scavenged, and marched. This moral burden was compounded by witnessing atrocities, massacres, and the often indiscriminate slaughter of civilians, men, women, and children alike, which forced participants to confront the stark reality that war in practice rarely aligned with the ideals preached from the pulpit, and that their spiritual mission coexisted uneasily with acts of sheer survival, self-preservation, and brutality, creating an internal landscape of fear, moral compromise, and existential reflection that no modern individual could easily imagine enduring. The environment itself was also a constant adversary. From arid deserts to rugged mountains, scorching sun to sudden torrential rain, harsh winds to treacherous river crossings, with armies vulnerable to both natural and human threats, simultaneously forcing adaptation, endurance, and resilience beyond anything they had previously experienced in Europe. Sleep was rare, brief, and fitful, often taken in crowded camps where disease and exposure were rampant. Food was meager and nutritionally inadequate, and clean water scarce, contributing to widespread weakness, dehydration, and susceptibility to infection. While soldiers witnessed firsthand the fragility of life, the randomness of death, and the extreme demands of human endurance, which together forged a stark understanding that the medieval world, especially in wartime, was far more unforgiving than the comfortable modern imagination allows. When combined, these factors, physical exhaustion, disease, logistical failure, moral ambiguity, psychological strain, environmental hazards, and the constant threat of violence illustrate why even a single day in the midst of a crusade would have been overwhelming for any individual accustomed to the relative safety and predictability of modern life. Survival demanded extraordinary resilience, courage, and adaptability, a capacity to navigate chaos, death, and suffering continuously, and the ability to reconcile spiritual faith with brutal reality, highlighting in stark, unflinching terms why the era was not merely harsh but relentlessly punishing, and why the experience of crusaders, both noble and common, was an extreme testament to the endurance of human beings under circumstances that would challenge, terrify, and exhaust anyone unaccustomed to such conditions, leaving an enduring historical lesson about the limits of human resilience and the profound difficulties of life during the Crusades. Life for crusaders in the field, after leaving the relative familiarity of Europe, quickly descended into a daily struggle that would test every physical and mental limit, as hunger, disease, exhaustion, and the constant threat of violence became persistent companions in a way that modern individuals would find almost impossible to imagine, where even the most basic comforts and securities were stripped away, leaving soldiers to confront an existence defined by uncertainty, deprivation, and relentless physical toil. Food was scarce, spoiling quickly in hot climates, and rations, if they existed at all, were often reduced to moldy bread, salted meat of questionable quality, dried legumes, or whatever could be scavenged from the local countryside, forcing soldiers to compete with each other and sometimes local populations for sustenance. And when supplies ran out, starvation became an immediate and urgent threat, weakening bodies, dulling minds, and leaving individuals vulnerable to disease, attack, and the sheer fatigue of marching dozens of miles across unforgiving terrain. While water sources were often contaminated, leading to dysentery, cholera, or typhoid outbreaks that could decimate entire units in a matter of days, creating an environment in which survival depended as much on avoiding illness and conserving energy as on skill with sword or spear. Disease, in particular, proved an unrelenting adversary, spreading rapidly through cramped tents, shared water supplies, unsanitary latrines, and close-quarter camps where lice, fleas, and vermin carried illness from man to man, exacerbating already debilitating conditions caused by malnutrition, exposure, and exhaustion. And the lack of effective medical treatment meant that simple wounds could become gangrenous, broken bones could fester, and infections could kill more effectively than any enemy sword, leaving survivors to confront the dual reality of a human opponent and a microscopic one, invisible yet lethal, a combination that created constant anxiety, physical weakness, and psychological strain. While the sheer pace of movement, forced marches, and battles offered little time for rest, nourishment, or recovery, compounding the cycle of vulnerability and creating a near-permanent state of fatigue. Environmental challenges only heightened the struggle, as crusaders traversed deserts with scorching sun, wind-blown sand, and parched water sources, while in mountainous regions they faced freezing temperatures, treacherous passes, avalanches, and hypothermia, all while wearing clothing, armor, and footwear designed for European climates and inadequate for these extremes, exposing men to frostbite, heatstroke, blisters, dehydration, and exhaustion, and forcing rapid adaptation under conditions that allowed little margin for error. Even sleeping was a trial, often done on cold, wet ground with minimal shelter, where the fear of nocturnal raids, wild animals, or sudden storms robbed men of rest, leaving them perpetually on edge, both physically and mentally, and creating a cumulative toll that degraded morale, judgment, and resilience. Beyond these immediate physical dangers, the psychological pressures were severe, as men were constantly aware that death or injury could strike at any moment, whether from combat, disease, starvation, or environmental hazards. While the moral and spiritual framework that had initially inspired their journey was challenged by the chaotic and brutal reality of life on campaign, witnessing the suffering of comrades, the indiscriminate killing of civilians, the brutality of siege warfare, and the moral compromises required for survival, from looting to negotiating with enemy populations, forced many to reconcile their actions with their faith, creating an internal landscape of guilt, fear, and moral confusion that weighed heavily alongside the physical exhaustion of daily life. The hierarchy of command, as orders from lords, captains, or clergy, had to be obeyed without question, regardless of the personal danger or hardship involved, and failure to comply could result in punishment or execution. While navigating the complexities of supply shortages, conflicting objectives, and interpersonal tensions within units required continuous social negotiation, diplomacy, and emotional regulation under extreme stress, a task made even more difficult by the fact that soldiers came from widely varying social, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds, with differing expectations, loyalties, and survival skills, and the daily necessity of maintaining cohesion and order amidst chaos. Hunger and disease was both exhausting and essential, as even minor disruptions could result in collapse, desertion, or massacre. Moreover, injuries sustained in battle or through accident were compounded by the constant exposure to harsh conditions, and the lack of medical knowledge meant that improvisation, crude treatments, and sheer luck determined survival more than skill or bravery. While the psychological impact of witnessing suffering, death, and the slow decay of one's own physical and mental capacities created trauma that could last a lifetime, shaping the soldier's identity, worldview, and resilience in ways both profound and often tragic, and leaving clear evidence of the immense cost of even a single day in this environment, as each day carried risks that could kill, maim, or permanently alter the lives of participants. Social life, while limited, could provide temporary respite, as soldiers formed bonds of camaraderie, mutual protection, and shared experience. Yet even these connections were strained by scarcity, fear, and moral tension, and the fleeting moments of rest, laughter, or storytelling were quickly overtaken by the next physical or logistical challenge, leaving little time for reflection or pleasure, and reinforcing the relentless, punishing rhythm of survival that defined Crusader life. The psychological interplay between fear, hope, faith, and exhaustion created a complex, dynamic experience that shaped every decision and action, influencing behavior in ways both predictable and surprising, as men learned to adapt, survive, and sometimes exploit opportunities amidst chaos, yet never escaped the reality that the physical and moral demands of each day were extraordinarily high. In addition, the ongoing threat of attack, both from organized enemy forces and opportunistic raiders, forced constant vigilance and required strategic thinking under pressure, where a single lapse could result in ambush, capture, or death, while environmental hazards, hunger, and illness created additional, persistent danger, making even routine tasks such as foraging, building camp, or tending to animals acts of risk and calculation, and requiring soldiers to constantly evaluate trade-offs between safety, necessity, and speed, all under the ever-present pressure of time, climate, and enemy movements, highlighting the extraordinary cognitive and emotional demands of survival, and why even a single day in such conditions could overwhelm an individual accustomed to safety, comfort, and predictability. Taken together, hunger, disease, environmental hazards, exhaustion, moral strain, and social pressure created a daily reality in which survival was a precarious balance, demanding resilience, adaptability, courage, and relentless vigilance. With no guarantee of success, no margin for error, and no respite from the harshness of the environment. The enemy, or the demands of human existence itself, illustrating in exhaustive, unflinching detail why the life of a crusader was one of constant struggle, and why even a single day required physical strength, mental fortitude, and emotional resilience beyond the capacity of most modern people to imagine, emphasizing the relentless, punishing nature of medieval warfare and the extraordinary endurance required to endure it at all. As the Crusaders pushed deeper into hostile territories, the daily realities of combat became an unrelenting source of physical exhaustion, mental stress, and moral strain, transforming what might have begun as a sacred pilgrimage into a continuous struggle for survival, where the sound of clashing swords, the screams of wounded comrades, the thundering of cavalry, and the hiss of arrows created a cacophony of terror that would test the resilience of even the most steadfast soldier, and where the psychological burden of anticipating the next battle, ambush, or skirmish never ceased, leaving men in a constant state of tension and hypervigilance, while the physical toll of marching long distances, carrying heavy armor and weapons, and enduring exposure to heat, cold, and rain compounded fatigue, injuries, and vulnerability, creating a feedback loop in which diminished strength increased risk, and the consequences of a single misstep could be immediate. The structure and hierarchy of the Crusader forces, while essential for maintaining order, also imposed rigid obedience, leaving little room for personal discretion or retreat, and punishing hesitation or perceived cowardice with brutal penalties, sometimes including execution, which added a layer of fear beyond the battlefield itself, as soldiers were accountable not only to enemy forces but also to their own commanders, whose priorities often aligned with strategy or politics rather than the safety or well-being of rank-and-file men, creating moral and psychological tension that compounded the already formidable physical challenges of combat. Combat scenarios were diverse and unpredictable, ranging from small raids and sieges to full-scale battles against organized armies, fortified positions, or highly mobile enemies, each presenting unique hazards and requiring rapid adaptation, courage, and tactical skill. And yet many soldiers were lacking experience with the range of weapons, formations, and strategies required, which left them vulnerable to both injury and death, while even the most experienced fighters faced the unpredictability of terrain, weather, and enemy tactics, and the chaos of battle ensured that survival often hinged on a combination of luck, endurance, and opportunistic decision-making, rather than heroism alone. The presence of non-combatants, such as camp followers, servants, and support staff, added further complexity, as protecting or assisting them became a moral and logistical responsibility, yet diverted energy and attention from personal survival, creating ethical dilemmas and operational challenges that had to be navigated continuously. The psychological burden of warfare was intensified by the moral dissonance inherent in the Crusades themselves, as soldiers were called to act in the name of God while simultaneously committing acts of violence that violated basic human instinct and conscience. From slaughtering enemy combatants to looting towns, punishing civilians, or razing property, all of which could create long-lasting trauma, guilt, and ethical conflict, while simultaneously being framed as divinely sanctioned and spiritually necessary, compelling men to reconcile survival, obedience, and faith in an environment where the line between right and wrong was blurred by circumstance, necessity, and institutional pressure. These experiences forged resilience in some, desensitization in others, and profound psychological scars in many, leaving a complex legacy that combined heroism, suffering, and moral ambiguity, while reinforcing the notion that survival required both physical stamina and emotional fortitude, as well as the capacity to compartmentalize fear, pain, and moral unease in order to continue functioning under extreme stress. Morale in the Crusader armies was a constant concern, as the combination of hunger, fatigue, disease, and fear could erode cohesion, loyalty, and combat effectiveness, with outbreaks of desertion, mutiny, or dissent occasionally threatening the stability of entire campaigns. And commanders had to balance discipline with motivation, using religious rhetoric, promises of reward, fear, and camaraderie to maintain order and commitment. Yet, even the strongest incentives could not eliminate the pervasive stress and uncertainty that characterized daily life. Victories, no matter how small, provided temporary relief, a brief reprieve from fear, hunger, and fatigue. Yet each success was immediately followed by the anticipation of the next challenge, the next march, siege, or engagement, creating a relentless cycle in which respite was fleeting and uncertainty constant, reinforcing the cumulative psychological and physical strain that shaped the lives of every participant, and demonstrating why enduring even a single day in this environment demanded extraordinary resilience. Physical injuries compounded these challenges, as even minor wounds could become fatal due to infection, lack of medical care, and continuous exposure to unsanitary conditions, while severe injuries often left individuals permanently disabled, dependent on others for survival, or psychologically traumatized. And yet the practical realities of military necessity meant that soldiers were often compelled to continue fighting or marching despite injury, a testament to the unrelenting demands placed upon their bodies and minds. Disease, malnutrition, and exhaustion magnified vulnerability, creating a vicious cycle in which the physical toll of combat increased susceptibility to illness, injury, and further fatigue, while environmental hazards such as heatstroke, hypothermia, dehydration, or exposure to the elements could strike with little warning, further complicating survival and underscoring the precariousness of existence in this brutal context. Social dynamics within the army also played a critical role in daily survival, as soldiers relied upon camaraderie, shared labor, and mutual protection. Yet interpersonal conflict, competition for resources, and differences in background, language, or rank could produce tension, jealousy, and conflict, requiring constant negotiation, diplomacy, and emotional regulation under extreme stress. While maintaining cohesion was essential to prevent chaos and maximize the effectiveness of combat and logistics, highlighting the complex interplay between individual endurance, group dynamics, and the environmental and operational pressures of war. Taken together, the relentless physical exertion, pervasive disease, scarcity of food and water, psychological strain, moral complexity, environmental hazards, and social pressures of Crusader life created a daily reality in which survival was never guaranteed, and each day demanded courage, resourcefulness, and endurance beyond what most modern humans could conceive. The combination of these factors illustrates why even a single day in the life of a Crusader could feel like a lifetime of struggle, emphasizing the extraordinary resilience, adaptability, and fortitude required to endure in the midst of one of the most challenging and unforgiving military campaigns in human history, and providing a sobering perspective on the true costs, both tangible and intangible, of medieval warfare in the Crusades. By the time Crusaders reached fortified cities and strategic strongholds in the Levant, the daily struggle for survival had evolved into a near-constant siege against both human and environmental forces, with starvation, disease, and psychological stress creating conditions as lethal as any battle, where the lack of adequate provisions forced soldiers to scavenge, ration, or consume spoiled and unpalatable food, while the relentless sun, bitter winds, torrential rains, and freezing nights compounded their physical suffering, weakening bodies, dulling reflexes, and leaving individuals vulnerable to injury, illness, or sudden death. And yet the hierarchical structure of command, strict discipline, and the expectation of obedience demanded that men continue their duties regardless of exhaustion, malnutrition, or moral hesitation, creating an environment in which personal agency was often subjugated to the demands of survival and strategy. The harsh realities of siege warfare required soldiers to endure not only the physical strain of constructing or defending fortifications, hauling siege engines, or digging trenches, but also the relentless psychological pressure of living under constant threat, where the noise of catapults, battering rams, and falling debris intermingled with the cries of the wounded and the sick, reinforcing a sense of omnipresent danger and eroding the mental resilience of even the most seasoned fighters. Hunger and malnutrition were particularly insidious, as chronic calorie deficiency, lack of vitamins, and exposure to heat or cold gradually weakened the immune system, impaired cognitive function, and increased irritability and despair, while the scarcity of fresh water contributed to dehydration, dysentery, and kidney or gastrointestinal complications, transforming ordinary tasks into arduous, life-threatening endeavors, and making the maintenance of camp, weaponry, and personal hygiene almost impossible under such conditions, thereby accelerating the spread of disease and amplifying mortality rates. The combination of physical degradation and psychological strain created a vicious cycle in which fatigue and despair undermined the capacity to fight, adapt, or make strategic decisions, while the relentless pressure of survival demanded that soldiers suppress fear, hunger, and moral hesitation in order to function effectively within the unit, highlighting the extraordinary resilience required to endure a single day in this environment. Siege warfare itself was a crucible of human endurance and ingenuity, as attackers and defenders alike were compelled to improvise under extreme conditions, balancing offensive and defensive tactics, repairing fortifications, constructing siege engines, and coordinating complex maneuvers while constantly exposed to enemy projectiles, fire, and sudden sorties. Yet every physical exertion was complicated. Hunger, injury, and disease, and failure at any step could result in immediate death or capture, demonstrating the fine line between tactical success and catastrophic failure, and leaving no room for error, hesitation, or inexperience. The psychological toll of siege life was equally severe, as prolonged confinement, constant danger, and the witnessing of widespread suffering induced stress, despair, and fear that were compounded by homesickness, grief for fallen comrades, and uncertainty about survival or the outcome of the campaign, while religious fervor, promises of salvation, and peer pressure provided only temporary relief from the pervasive sense of dread, leaving soldiers in a near constant state of cognitive and emotional strain, where sleep, food, and morale were intertwined with survival, and any lapse in attention, courage, or discipline could prove fatal. The human cost of these sieges was staggering, with thousands succumbing to starvation, dehydration, disease, exposure, or enemy action, and survivors often faced permanent disability, chronic illness, or psychological trauma, while those who remained functional had to navigate moral ambiguity, choosing between survival, loyalty, obedience, and conscience, as looting, requisitioning supplies, and occasional brutality against civilians became necessary acts to maintain strength and cohesion, yet created ethical conflicts that haunted participants long after the immediate threat had passed. The blending of moral compromise, physical suffering, and psychological exhaustion formed a persistent, inescapable reality that shaped every decision, interaction, and action, reinforcing the extraordinary resilience required to continue functioning under such relentless pressure. The environment outside the walls of cities added additional challenges as terrain, climate, and disease combined with sporadic skirmishes, raids, and ambushes to create a dynamic and unpredictable risk landscape, where even foraging, scouting, or simple travel could result in sudden death, injury, or the spread of disease, and where the constant need for vigilance created chronic stress that undermined morale and cognitive function, forcing individuals to operate on instinct, experience, and group coordination in order to survive. Exposure to sunstroke, hypothermia, or extreme fatigue could incapacitate men, while fear of surprise attacks, sudden collapses of siege works, or enemy infiltration reinforced the omnipresent sense of danger, amplifying psychological pressure and leaving soldiers in a near perpetual state of alertness and anxiety. Social dynamics within the army also played a critical role in survival, as dependence on comrades, leaders, and support staff was essential for distributing labor, defending vulnerable individuals, and maintaining morale. Yet, interpersonal tensions, resource competition, and hierarchical pressures frequently strained these relationships, demanding negotiation, cooperation, and constant vigilance, while failure to adapt socially could result in isolation, exposure, or death, reinforcing the multi-dimensional challenges of siege life that combined physical, psychological, moral, and social survival into a relentless test of endurance. Taken together, the interplay of hunger, disease, exhaustion, environmental hazard, psychological strain, moral ambiguity, and social pressure illustrates the extraordinary demands placed upon crusaders during siege warfare, highlighting why even a single day in such circumstances required an unparalleled combination of physical strength, emotional fortitude, mental resilience, and moral adaptability, and providing a stark, unflinching perspective on the extreme difficulty of life in the Crusades, emphasizing the profound gulf between modern perceptions of comfort and security and the relentless reality of medieval military campaigns, and demonstrating why survival in this context was an extraordinary achievement that demanded the full extent of human capability, courage, and endurance. The Crusades were not merely military expeditions. They were deeply entwined with the political, religious, and social machinery of medieval Europe, where the papacy, kings, and local lords exploited the fervor of faith to achieve goals that were as temporal as they were spiritual, crafting a narrative in which devotion, piety, and salvation were intertwined with strategic interests, power, consolidation, and territorial ambition, and where the promises of indulgences, absolution, and divine favor were leveraged to compel participation from a population whose daily life was already consumed by toil, hunger, and fear, thereby transforming ordinary men and women into instruments of both holy and worldly agendas. The papacy, positioned at the apex of this system, skillfully framed the Crusades as a divine imperative, portraying participation as a sacred duty with eternal rewards, while simultaneously asserting moral and spiritual authority over kings, lords, and commoners alike, creating a dynamic in which obedience to ecclesiastical authority became both a religious necessity and a political obligation, and where failure to heed the call could result in social ostracism, loss of status, or spiritual condemnation, amplifying the pressure on individuals to participate despite the manifest dangers, and effectively intertwining religious devotion with coercion, ambition, and social conformity in ways that few modern observers could fully grasp. Kings and local lords, in turn, recognized the strategic opportunities inherent in mobilizing masses of motivated men, using the Crusades as a mechanism to consolidate power, suppress internal dissent, and direct martial energy outward, often to regions far from their own domains, thereby reducing the threat of rebellion or unrest at home, while simultaneously pursuing economic, territorial, or dynastic gains. And in this context, the rhetoric of faith served as both justification and catalyst for campaigns that were politically expedient as much as spiritually sanctioned, creating a confluence of motives in which individual survival, religious devotion, and political ambition intersected, often with devastating consequences for participants and local populations alike. The Church's ability to manipulate perception was augmented through sermons, letters, and public rituals, which emphasized apocalyptic visions, moral duty, and divine punishment for non-compliance, while simultaneously glorifying those who took up the cross as exemplars of virtue, courage, and divine favor, a dual narrative that reinforced both fear and aspiration, compelling individuals to subordinate personal concerns, family obligations, and self-preservation to a broader, abstract religious cause, and fostering a cultural environment in which questioning authority, resisting mobilization, or abandoning a campaign could carry not only social and spiritual penalties, but also profound psychological burden, as guilt, shame, and fear were woven into the fabric of obedience, creating internal pressures that rivaled any external threat. Within this framework, the mobilization of ordinary people often exposed them to extraordinary hardships for reasons far removed from their own experience, as logistical failures, environmental hazards, and the unpredictability of warfare imposed risks and suffering that were justified in the name of abstract spiritual goals. While political leaders sought to maximize advantage, secure tribute, or consolidate territory, frequently at the expense of those who bore the brunt of the danger and privation. The disconnect between high-level strategy and individual survival amplified the already brutal conditions of campaign life, highlighting the vulnerability of the rank-and-file crusaders to both human and natural forces, while also demonstrating the complex interplay of faith, politics, and social obligation that defined participation in the Crusades, and the ways in which institutions shaped behavior, choices, and risk in ways that were largely invisible to the participants themselves. The political landscape within the Crusader armies and occupied territories added further layers of complexity. As alliances shifted, rivalries emerged, and power dynamics influenced decisions about strategy, supplies, leadership, and conflict resolution, creating an environment in which loyalty was demanded but often contested. Orders were followed, but sometimes ignored, and trust was both essential and precarious, with the potential for betrayal, desertion, or insubordination threatening cohesion, survival, and success. Within such a framework, personal initiative and judgment were constrained by both hierarchy and circumstance, while every action carried the weight of potential consequence, and every failure could have cascading effects on both individuals and groups, demonstrating the intricate and often precarious interdependence of military, political, and religious structures in shaping daily life, beyond the immediate pressures of obedience and survival. The moral and ethical demands placed on crusaders were amplified by religious ideology, which framed success, failure, and survival in cosmic terms, imbuing every decision, action, and interaction with spiritual significance, and creating psychological tension as individuals navigated the dissonance between faith, morality, and the stark reality of violence, scarcity, and mortality. Killing enemies, looting towns, or negotiating with local populations were morally complex acts that had to be rationalized in light of promises of divine sanction, while failure, hesitation, or refusal carried spiritual, social, and psychological consequences, leaving individuals in a continuous negotiation between survival, obedience, conscience, and ambition. The Crusades also exposed participants to cultural, religious, and political worlds vastly different from their own, requiring adaptation, negotiation, and a form of pragmatic diplomacy that existed alongside the idealized narrative of holy war, and creating opportunities for learning, compromise, and sometimes brutality, as soldiers and leaders encountered unfamiliar social structures, languages, and customs, yet were compelled to navigate them under conditions of extreme stress, hunger, disease, and constant threat, revealing the extraordinary demands placed on cognitive, emotional, and moral faculties, and underscoring why survival, let alone success, required resilience, adaptability, and strategic thinking that went far beyond mere martial skill. Taken together, these dynamics, religious authority, political manipulation, social expectation, moral complexity, and environmental and operational hazard, created a world in which the Crusades were not only battles of arms, but battles of the mind, spirit, and social position, in which ordinary individuals were compelled to navigate intricate networks of power, faith, and survival, making even a single day a challenge that demanded physical endurance, mental fortitude, moral reasoning, and emotional resilience beyond the capacity of most modern individuals, and providing a stark insight into the interwoven forces that shaped one of the most tumultuous, dangerous, and morally complex periods of medieval history. Once Crusader armies were on foreign soil, the complex web of political alliances, personal ambitions, and hierarchical obligations became immediately apparent, revealing a level of social and strategic complexity that rivaled even the harsh physical demands of campaign life. Generals, nobles, and knights were constantly negotiating not only with their peers but also with local rulers, neighboring states, and rival factions within the army, navigating a delicate balance between cooperation and competition, loyalty and betrayal, obedience and initiative, while ordinary soldiers were often left to endure the consequences of decisions made far above their pay grade, exposed to danger, hunger, and disease without any influence over strategy, yet expected to act with unquestioning discipline, courage, and faith, highlighting the extreme social pressures that compounded the already punishing physical environment of the Crusades. Alliances were tenuous and shifting, forged out of necessity rather than trust, as political leaders leveraged the presence of foreign armies to secure territorial gains, resources, or strategic advantage, often resulting in sudden betrayals, abandonment, or shifting loyalties that could turn a hopeful advance into catastrophic disaster within hours or days, forcing participants to remain vigilant not only against enemy forces but also against the unpredictability of their own side. While the consequences of misreading intentions or failing to adapt quickly could be immediate and deadly, whether through ambush, withdrawal of supplies, or deliberate exposure to combat risks, command itself was a source of constant tension, as authority was fragmented across a patchwork of kings, princes, bishops, and lords, each pursuing objectives that could overlap or conflict with those of others, requiring careful negotiation, diplomacy, and compromise to prevent open conflict within the ranks, while also ensuring that logistical, strategic, and operational objectives were met, and the complex interplay of military and political priorities often left subordinate leaders and ordinary soldiers in situations where obedience could demand near-suicidal action or moral compromise, further heightening the physical, emotional, and ethical strain of daily life. Failure to navigate this complexity effectively could lead to disastrous outcomes, including the collapse of morale, desertion, loss of territory, or the death of thousands. Betrayal and internal discord were common, as political actors sought to advance their own power or protect their territories, and crusader leaders frequently faced conflicting obligations to allies, superiors, and their own men, creating situations in which the consequences of loyalty or disobedience could be catastrophic. While the need to maintain authority in the face of fear, exhaustion, or dissent required constant vigilance, strategic communication, and the occasional use of intimidation, punishment, or reward, each of which carried its own risks and moral complications, leaving participants in a continuous negotiation between survival, obedience, and self-interest. The influence of religion, while foundational, often intersected with these political dynamics in ways that complicated decisions, as spiritual authority was used to justify actions, enforce obedience, and frame victories and defeats within cosmic terms, while the same religious narratives could be manipulated by ambitious leaders to secure loyalty, intimidate rivals, or rationalize morally ambiguous behavior, creating a constant tension between faith-driven motivation and pragmatic decision-making, and leaving crusaders to navigate a morally complex landscape in which ethical clarity was often unattainable, and choices were evaluated simultaneously in terms of spiritual, social, and practical consequences. Within the army itself, communication challenges, differing expectations, and cultural diversity intensified these pressures, as soldiers hailed from multiple regions, spoke different dialects, and brought varying martial experience, social status, and personal ambition, creating an environment in which cohesion required constant effort, shared rituals, and negotiated norms, while failure to maintain social bonds or mutual trust could quickly escalate into conflict, isolation, or even death, as small errors in coordination or loyalty had amplified consequences in the unforgiving environment of war. Strategic and tactical decision-making was further complicated by terrain, climate, and the unpredictability of enemy actions, which required rapid adaptation, flexible thinking, and the ability to improvise under pressure. Yet the hierarchical and politically influenced chain of command often constrained initiative, forcing individuals to balance personal judgment with obedience, risk with reward, and survival with loyalty. In situations where every choice carried consequences for life, property, and moral standing, underscoring the multifaceted nature of the challenges faced by crusaders. The psychological toll of this environment was immense, as participants were constantly forced to reconcile fear, exhaustion, hunger, moral ambiguity, and the consequences of their actions, both immediate and long-term, while maintaining vigilance, discipline, and a semblance of hope, creating chronic stress, fatigue, and anxiety that compounded physical deprivation and environmental hazards, and leaving individuals emotionally and cognitively taxed beyond what most modern humans could imagine, while still requiring them to perform tasks essential to survival, strategy, and cohesion. Taken together, the constant negotiation of alliances, vigilance against betrayal, obedience to fragmented authority, adaptation to rapidly changing circumstances, and navigation of moral and psychological challenges combined to create an environment in which even a single day demanded extraordinary resilience, endurance, and intelligence, illustrating why the Crusades were as much a battle of social, political, and moral skill as they were of physical strength or martial prowess, and highlighting the profound and often underappreciated complexity of survival in the midst of one of the most morally and politically intricate periods of medieval history, where the line between heroism, survival, loyalty, and betrayal was constantly tested, and the consequences of error or misjudgment could be catastrophic for both individuals and entire armies. As the Crusaders advanced deeper into foreign territories, the human consequences of political ambition, religious fervor, and hierarchical obligation became painfully clear, revealing that the cost of these campaigns was measured not merely in strategic gains or territorial conquest, but in the daily suffering, moral compromise, and relentless physical and psychological strain imposed on the soldiers, camp followers, and civilians caught in the conflict. The intersection of political maneuvering and religious justification meant that ordinary men and women were often forced to endure extreme hardship, starvation, disease, and death for objectives determined by leaders whose motives combined self-interest, ambition, and faith, leaving participants with limited agency and overwhelming responsibilities, yet still demanding obedience and courage, and creating an environment in which the value of human life was subordinated to the broader goals of conquest, territorial control, or the consolidation of ecclesiastical and secular power. Soldiers, many of whom were peasants, tradesmen, or minor nobles with little military experience, faced exhaustion from constant marching, exposure to extreme climates, and the physical toll of wearing heavy armor and carrying weapons across unforgiving terrain, while simultaneously enduring hunger, malnutrition, and the debilitating effects of disease, from dysentery and fever to infections caused by untreated wounds, all exacerbated by the lack of adequate medical knowledge, sanitation, and supplies. The physical strain was relentless, yet the expectation of obedience, loyalty, and active participation in combat, siege operations, and logistical support demanded that individuals push beyond the limits of endurance, performing tasks that modern observers would recognize as both extraordinarily dangerous and physically debilitating, with even minor errors potentially resulting in death or permanent disability. The moral and psychological burden of participating in the Crusades was equally severe, as individuals were required to reconcile their actions killing, looting, or destroying property with the religious justifications presented by clergy and commanders, creating cognitive dissonance and long-lasting emotional trauma, while witnessing the suffering and death of comrades, civilians, and prisoners added layers of grief, fear, and moral uncertainty that compounded the physical hardships. These psychological pressures were intensified by the constant threat of betrayal, desertion, or mismanagement within the ranks, as fragmented command structures and shifting alliances created an environment in which trust was tenuous, loyalty was tested, and strategic decisions often placed individuals in morally ambiguous or physically perilous positions. Disease and starvation acted as silent adversaries, claiming countless lives and weakening the survivors, while environmental hazards from scorching desert sun to freezing mountain passes, torrential rains to treacherous river crossings added additional layers of risk, ensuring that even routine activities such as foraging, carrying supplies, or constructing siege works became life-threatening endeavors, where a single misstep could result in injury, illness, or death, and where survival depended on constant vigilance, ingenuity, and sheer physical resilience. The cumulative effect of these challenges was an environment in which each day was a test of endurance, adaptability, and mental fortitude, with no respite from the relentless pressures of combat, environmental stress, and human conflict. The interplay between political objectives and religious rhetoric, as leaders leveraged the promise of salvation, indulgence, and divine favor to justify campaigns that were often politically motivated, compelling individuals to act in ways that prioritized obedience, strategic necessity, and social conformity over personal well-being or ethical clarity, and forcing soldiers to navigate a complex moral landscape in which choices were rarely clear-cut and consequences were immediate, tangible, and often tragic. The burden of maintaining faith while enduring hardship, violence, and moral compromise created a psychological environment as punishing as the physical landscape, demanding emotional regulation, internal fortitude, and the capacity to reconcile faith with experience in order to survive. Within the army, social dynamics and hierarchical pressures added another layer of complexity, as soldiers relied on mutual support, discipline, and cohesion to survive. Yet, interpersonal conflict, competition for scarce resources, and differences in background, rank, and experience threatened unity, necessitating constant negotiation, compromise, and emotional resilience. While the consequences of social failure, ostracism, punishment, or death amplified stress and shaped behavior under extreme conditions, the interdependence of physical survival, social cohesion, moral negotiation, and psychological resilience created a multidimensional landscape in which the success of the individual and the army was contingent on navigating challenges across all fronts simultaneously. The cost to civilians and non-combatants was equally profound, as villages and towns along the Crusader route were often requisitioned, looted, or destroyed to sustain armies, and local populations endured violence, displacement, and scarcity, with consequences that were exacerbated by the fragility of medieval logistics and the unpredictability of warfare, further highlighting the human toll of campaigns framed as holy wars. Men, women, and children became involuntary participants in conflicts dictated by distant political and religious authorities, illustrating that the impact of the Crusades extended far beyond the battlefield, affecting every aspect of human life, from health and safety to psychological and social well-being, and leaving legacies of suffering that could last generations. Taken together, the combination of political maneuvering, religious imperatives, logistical failure, environmental hazards, disease, starvation, combat, moral complexity, and social tension demonstrates why the Crusades were a period of extraordinary human suffering and endurance, and why even a single day could challenge the limits of physical strength, emotional resilience, cognitive capacity, and moral judgment, providing a sobering perspective on the scale of hardship, the demands of obedience, and the extraordinary courage required to survive one of the most punishing periods of medieval history, and underscoring in vivid, unflinching detail the harsh realities of life under the dual pressures of political ambition and religious ideology. Life in the Crusader camps was a daily struggle against the unforgiving elements, inadequate shelter, and the constant threat of disease, hunger, and injury, conditions that would challenge even the most physically robust and mentally resilient individuals. As tents and makeshift structures offered only minimal protection from scorching sun, torrential rains, icy winds, and freezing nights, leaving soldiers exposed to hypothermia, heatstroke, frostbite, and exhaustion. While the limited supply of blankets, cloaks, and other basic clothing made protection against the climate virtually impossible for many, forcing improvisation with whatever materials were at hand, from burlap sacks to scavenged cloth. Yet these measures often proved insufficient in the face of persistent weather extremes. Soldiers and camp followers alike were constantly forced to contend with mud, flooding, and the deterioration of wooden supports, which could cause tents to collapse or become waterlogged, while exposure to wind and dust carried additional risks of respiratory illness and general physical degradation, creating an environment in which survival depended on constant vigilance, adaptability, and endurance. Clothing, while designed for European climates, was often wholly inadequate for the diverse environments encountered during the Crusades, leaving soldiers poorly protected against heat, cold, rain, and snow, while armor, though essential for combat, added weight, restricted mobility, and trapped moisture, further compromising thermoregulation and contributing to fatigue, chafing, sores, and infections. Shoes and boots were frequently worn through after long marches over rough terrain, exposing feet to injury, frostbite, and blisters. And many soldiers endured months of discomfort without replacement or repair, which compounded physical suffering and reduced effectiveness in both labor and combat, while the constant presence of vermin such as lice, fleas, and rodents added a persistent layer of discomfort and disease risk, emphasizing the relentless nature of camp life. Hygiene was a near impossible task, as access to clean water, washing facilities, and sanitation was extremely limited, forcing soldiers and camp followers to contend with mud, human and animal waste, and stagnant water as part of daily life, which not only increased the risk of dysentery, cholera, and other gastrointestinal diseases, but also exacerbated skin infections, lice infestations, and general malaise, further weakening already exhausted bodies and compounding the difficulties of sustaining effective combat readiness. The close proximity of individuals in cramped tents and communal spaces accelerated the spread of contagious diseases, while exposure to open air, rain, or sun left individuals vulnerable to respiratory illnesses, heat stroke, or hypothermia, highlighting the fragility of human endurance under prolonged environmental stress. Food scarcity and nutritional inadequacy were constant concerns. As supply lines were unreliable, spoilage was common, and rations were meager and often of questionable quality, with soldiers subsisting on bread, salted meat, dried legumes, and foraged items that provided minimal sustenance, yet failed to meet caloric, vitamin, or mineral requirements, leading to malnutrition, fatigue, and vulnerability to disease. While foraging or raiding for additional provisions brought its own risks, from attack by enemy forces or hostile locals to exposure, injury, or legal punishment by commanders seeking to maintain discipline. The physical and psychological burden of hunger was relentless, weakening morale, reducing combat effectiveness, and exacerbating interpersonal tensions within units, as scarcity intensified competition and social stress, while simultaneously highlighting the necessity of cooperation, improvisation, and ingenuity to survive. The organization of the camp itself reflected a delicate balance between military efficiency, social hierarchy, and practical necessity, as commanders sought to maintain order, supply chains, and defensive readiness, while soldiers and support staff navigated complex social structures defined by rank, loyalty, and mutual dependence, where failure to adhere to expectations could result in punishment, ostracism, or death. Despite this, small acts of camaraderie, mutual assistance, and shared problem-solving provided critical support, allowing soldiers to endure the relentless hardships of camp life, and fostering bonds of solidarity that could determine both survival and success under extreme conditions. Sleep was another precious and scarce resource, with soldiers often resting on cold, wet, or muddy ground, in cramped tents, or in shifts to maintain watch, leaving them chronically fatigued, disoriented, and highly vulnerable to environmental exposure, disease, or sudden attack. While the psychological stress of maintaining vigilance under such conditions compounded physical exhaustion, creating a feedback loop in which lack of rest increased vulnerability, reduced performance, and amplified anxiety, fear, and irritability. The mental resilience required to cope with these conditions, alongside the demands of labor, combat, and survival, was extraordinary, as each day combined physical hardship, environmental danger, and social complexity into a relentless, high-stakes continuum with little opportunity for recovery or respite. In addition, the moral and emotional dimensions of camp life were omnipresent, as soldiers witnessed suffering, injury, and death among their peers, while negotiating the ethical complexities of maintaining survival, obedience, and faith in the midst of scarcity, disease, and exposure, forcing individuals to reconcile human empathy with the necessities of endurance, the demands of hierarchical authority, and the imperatives of self-preservation. Moments of grief, fear, camaraderie, and relief were intertwined with exhaustion and danger, creating a psychological landscape as punishing and complex as the physical environment itself, requiring cognitive flexibility, emotional regulation, and moral negotiation on a continuous basis. Taken together, the combination of inadequate shelter, insufficient clothing, environmental hazards, disease, hunger, fatigue, social complexity, and psychological strain created a daily existence that was extraordinarily challenging, demanding extraordinary resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability, and illustrating why even a single day in the camps of the Crusades was a severe test of human endurance, a demonstration of the interplay between physical, psychological, moral, and social demands, and a stark reminder of the harsh, unrelenting conditions under which medieval soldiers and camp followers lived, worked, and fought, highlighting the extraordinary human capacity for survival in the face of relentless adversity. For the Crusaders, securing adequate food and water was a daily challenge that could determine life or death, a relentless struggle exacerbated by the difficulties of logistics, the scarcity of resources, and the unpredictable climate of the Middle Eastern terrain, where rivers, streams, and wells were often contaminated. Seasonal droughts were common, and long supply lines from Europe were vulnerable to disruption, attack, or spoilage, creating a precarious situation in which the survival of individuals and entire units depended on ingenuity, endurance, and the ability to endure extreme deprivation. Water, though essential for life, was often rationed or difficult to obtain, and soldiers frequently drank from stagnant pools, polluted streams, or water stored in unsanitary conditions, leading to outbreaks of dysentery, cholera, and other waterborne diseases that could decimate entire armies. While the physical and psychological strain of thirst, compounded by heat, long marches, and hard labor, reduced combat effectiveness, impaired judgment, and intensified social tensions as competition for limited supplies became a source of conflict among men. While commanders had to balance the distribution of resources to maintain morale, cohesion, and operational readiness, food shortages were equally critical, as supply chains from Europe were slow, unreliable, and subject to loss or delay, while local foraging or requisitioning often exposed soldiers to attack, theft, or negotiation with hostile populations, forcing armies to survive on minimal rations that consisted largely of stale bread, salted or dried meat, legumes, and whatever could be scavenged from the surrounding countryside, which provided insufficient calories, protein, or micronutrients, leading to malnutrition, fatigue, and a weakened immune system, exacerbating vulnerability to disease, environmental stress, and combat injuries, and creating a vicious cycle in which physical weakness further reduced the ability to gather food, defend supplies, or perform labor-intensive tasks essential to survival. The physical demands of obtaining and consuming food added another layer of hardship, as soldiers were often required to participate in foraging expeditions, hunting, or the transport of heavy provisions across difficult terrain, while simultaneously performing labor in camp, maintaining weapons and armor, and preparing defenses, tasks that were made more exhausting by heat, cold, exhaustion, and injury. Even consuming the limited rations available was a challenge, as stale, moldy, or poorly preserved food could induce gastrointestinal distress, nausea, or poisoning, while the lack of variety and nutrition contributed to scurvy, weakness, and long-term health deterioration, creating a situation in which the basic act of eating became both a survival strategy and a test of endurance. Social dynamics played a critical role in the allocation and sharing of food and water, as scarcity forced soldiers to negotiate, cooperate, and sometimes compete for essential sustenance, while leaders had to implement systems of rationing, prioritization, and discipline to prevent chaos, desertion, or mutiny, balancing fairness with the exigencies of survival and operational needs. Failure to maintain order or equitable distribution could rapidly degrade morale, cohesion, and effectiveness, highlighting the interdependence of survival, social structure, and leadership under extreme conditions. The psychological effects of hunger and thirst were profound, creating constant preoccupation, irritability, and emotional strain, which could amplify fear, stress, and tension within units, while also shaping behavior, decision-making, and interpersonal interactions as individuals struggled to prioritize survival while maintaining loyalty, discipline, and social cohesion, highlighting the cognitive and emotional demands of life under extreme deprivation. The inability to meet these basic needs could result in panic, aggression, poor judgment, or collapse, emphasizing that sustenance was as crucial to daily functioning as weapons, armor, or training, and that the mental toll of scarcity was inseparable from the physical challenges faced by crusaders. Environmental factors, including heat, cold, wind, rain, and the variable terrain, further complicated access to water and food, as rivers and streams could become impassable. Wells could dry up, and vegetation or game could be sparse, forcing soldiers to expend energy and risk exposure in search of basic sustenance, while logistical failures could leave entire units vulnerable to starvation or dehydration for days or weeks at a time. And the threat of enemy attack during foraging or supply transport created constant danger, requiring vigilance, coordination, and rapid decision-making under pressure. The interaction of environmental hazard, scarcity, and human conflict made survival a continuous, high-stakes challenge. Taken together, the relentless struggle for food and water, compounded by disease, fatigue, environmental extremes, social pressure, and operational demands, created a daily existence in which survival was never guaranteed, and in which extraordinary physical endurance, mental resilience, emotional fortitude, and strategic thinking were required merely to sustain life, demonstrating why the daily realities of sustenance during the Crusades were as grueling, dangerous, and psychologically taxing as the battles themselves, and providing a stark, unflinching perspective on the extraordinary challenges faced by those who sought to survive in a world defined by scarcity, conflict, and unrelenting adversity. Life in the Crusader camps demanded ceaseless labor and vigilance, where every day was defined by exhausting physical work, monotonous tasks, and the constant need to maintain readiness against both natural and human threats, with soldiers, servants, and camp followers performing back-breaking duties such as digging trenches, fortifying positions, transporting heavy equipment, tending fires, preparing food, and repairing shelters, often while fatigued, malnourished, and exposed to the elements, which created a cumulative toll on the body that could not be offset by brief periods of rest or inadequate rations, leaving individuals physically weakened and psychologically strained, while the omnipresent threat of enemy attack required vigilance even during moments of labor, as raids, ambushes, or sudden skirmishes could erupt without warning, and failure to respond effectively could result in injury, death, or loss of vital supplies. The coordination of labor was also a critical component of camp survival, as teams had to work in concert to construct defenses, transport provisions, or maintain weaponry, and the breakdown of discipline, miscommunication, or fatigue could create cascading failures that imperiled the entire unit, reinforcing the necessity of strict obedience, cohesion, and mutual reliance under extreme conditions. Watch duty was another essential and punishing component of camp life, as soldiers were assigned shifts to guard perimeters, monitor for enemy movement, and maintain vigilance over camp activities, often at night, in extreme weather, or under conditions of chronic sleep deprivation. which compounded physical exhaustion and heightened psychological stress, leaving guards vulnerable to mistakes, surprise attacks, or accidents. While the monotony of long hours in the cold or heat tested mental endurance, fostering anxiety, irritability, and tension, and forcing individuals to cultivate extraordinary focus, discipline, and resilience to remain alert despite fatigue, fear, and discomfort. The constant alternation between labor and watch duty created a cycle of exertion and vigilance that left little time for recovery, reflection, or leisure, reinforcing the relentless nature of survival in the camps. Beyond the immediate physical demands, soldiers were also responsible for maintaining personal gear, weapons, and armor, a task made arduous by limited resources, environmental wear, and lack of repair facilities, yet essential for both combat readiness and personal protection, as any failure in maintenance could compromise effectiveness in battle, increase vulnerability to injury, or reduce mobility. While the accumulation of wear, damage, and grime contributed to general discomfort, infections, and fatigue, emphasizing that even routine maintenance was inseparable from the broader demands of survival in a hostile environment. Social dynamics within the camp further influenced daily life, as cooperation, hierarchy, and interpersonal negotiation were critical to completing labor, distributing scarce resources, and maintaining morale, while interpersonal conflict, competition, or insubordination could disrupt operations, undermine cohesion, and threaten survival, forcing individuals to manage both physical and social challenges simultaneously, balancing obedience with initiative, personal needs with group priorities, and endurance with empathy, in a continuous negotiation that defined camp life and shaped the collective resilience of the unit. Psychological strain was compounded by constant exposure to the suffering of others, the fear of disease, injury, or death, and the monotony of repetitive labor, which together created mental fatigue, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. While the pressure to perform effectively under observation and in alignment with hierarchical expectations reinforced stress and limited opportunities for relief, rest, or personal expression, leaving soldiers to develop coping mechanisms, camaraderie, and adaptive strategies to maintain functional capacity and morale despite persistent adversity. Environmental conditions, heat, cold, rain, mud, dust, wind, and uneven terrain add yet another layer of difficulty, making every task more dangerous and exhausting, while the threat of sudden enemy action required constant readiness, quick reaction, and the ability to switch between labor, defense, and survival at a moment's notice, amplifying both physical and mental demands, and creating a rhythm of life in which rest was brief, danger was constant, and the margin for error was vanishingly small. Taken together, the combination of ceaseless labor, watch, duty, maintenance, environmental hazard, social negotiation, and psychological strain produced an environment in which every day tested endurance, adaptability, and resilience to the extreme, illustrating why survival in a Crusader camp required extraordinary physical strength, mental fortitude, emotional regulation, and social intelligence, and highlighting the relentless, punishing, and multifaceted reality of daily life during one of the most challenging periods of medieval warfare, providing a vivid perspective on the human capacity to endure, adapt, and survive in circumstances defined by scarcity, danger, and unyielding hardship. The reality of combat during the Crusades was a far cry from the glorified depictions of chivalry and honor. As soldiers faced relentless brutality, indiscriminate violence, and the ever-present specter of death, where the clash of swords, the hissing of arrows, and the thunder of cavalry charges created an atmosphere of chaos, fear, and carnage that tested the limits of physical endurance, mental resilience, and emotional fortitude. Each engagement, whether a pitched battle, skirmish, or siege assault, demanded not only martial skill but also rapid decision-making under extreme stress, situational awareness, and the ability to suppress instinctive fear in order to function effectively. While the consequences of hesitation, error, or exhaustion were immediate and often fatal, making every action a high-stakes gamble where survival could hinge on luck as much as strategy, courage, or experience. Soldiers were exposed to a wide variety of weapons and tactics, from swords, spears, maces, and axes to bows, crossbows, and siege engines, each requiring skill, strength, and coordination, while the weight of armor and the physical demands of combat added layers of fatigue, restricted movement, and increased the risk of injury or collapse, creating an environment in which even the most experienced fighters were vulnerable to unpredictable threats, and in which the endurance of mind and body was as critical as technical proficiency. The psychological strain of battle was immense, as soldiers confronted the simultaneous fear of injury or death, the sight of wounded or dying comrades, the chaos of uncoordinated movements, and the moral weight of killing, often in circumstances where distinction between combatant and non-combatant was blurred, requiring rapid moral and emotional negotiation to continue functioning. The mental resilience necessary to endure repeated engagements, prolonged exposure to violence, and the cumulative effects of fear and fatigue was extraordinary, as panic or hesitation could spread through ranks and precipitate routs, while courage, discipline, and cohesion were essential to maintaining operational effectiveness. Sieges, one of the most grueling forms of combat, compounded these challenges as soldiers faced continuous physical labor in constructing or assaulting fortifications, exposure to projectiles, fire, and collapse, and the ever-present threat of disease, starvation, and environmental extremes, while defenders employed countermeasures such as boiling oil, arrows, rocks, and traps, transforming every moment into a test of both endurance and ingenuity. Survival in these conditions required not only physical capability, but also strategic thinking, adaptability, and a high tolerance for fear, discomfort, and risk. Command structure played a critical role in determining the effectiveness and survival of units, as leaders were responsible for coordinating maneuvers, managing morale, and directing resources under rapidly changing circumstances, while soldiers had to execute orders precisely despite exhaustion, injury, and sensory overload, balancing obedience with initiative in ways that could determine life or death, and highlighting the interplay between hierarchical authority, individual capability, and the chaotic realities of medieval warfare. Environmental and logistical challenges compounded the physical and psychological burdens of battle, as extreme heat, cold, rain, mud, and uneven terrain affected mobility, fatigue, and health, while scarcity of food, water, and medical supplies intensified vulnerability, and disease spread rapidly among wounded and exhausted soldiers, creating cascading effects that undermined both individual and unit performance, emphasizing the multifaceted nature of survival in combat. Social dynamics within the army further influenced outcomes as trust, camaraderie, and cohesion were essential to executing complex maneuvers, maintaining morale, and ensuring mutual protection, while competition, jealousy, or fear could exacerbate tension, reduce cooperation, and compromise effectiveness, highlighting the importance of social intelligence and emotional regulation alongside martial skill. Small acts of bravery, leadership, or support could have disproportionate impacts on both morale and operational success, reinforcing the interconnectedness of human relationships, strategic execution, and survival under extreme conditions. Taken together, the physical, psychological, moral, social, and environmental challenges of combat during the Crusades illustrate why each battle was an extraordinary test of human capability, endurance, and adaptability, demanding that soldiers navigate a constant interplay between fear, duty, skill, and strategy, while providing a sobering, unflinching view of the brutality, complexity, and human cost of medieval warfare, and demonstrating why survival required not only courage but also resilience, ingenuity, and an extraordinary capacity to endure both the immediate violence of combat and the cumulative hardships of campaign life. The tactical complexity of medieval warfare during the Crusades was staggering, requiring commanders to balance offensive and defensive maneuvers, coordinate diverse units, and respond to unpredictable enemy strategies, all while contending with environmental hazards, logistical limitations, and the physical and psychological exhaustion of soldiers, making every decision a high-stakes gamble in which success or failure could mean the difference between survival and annihilation, and where the chaos of battle constantly tested both individual skill and collective coordination. Commanders had to organize infantry, cavalry, archers, and siege equipment in synchronized formations, anticipate enemy movements, protect vulnerable flanks, and manage reserves, all while maintaining morale, discipline, and communication in an environment where noise, smoke, and fear obscured perception, delayed commands, and amplified confusion, leaving subordinate leaders and soldiers to interpret, improvise, and act decisively under extreme pressure, often with incomplete information and under the constant threat of injury or death. Siege warfare, a defining feature of Crusader campaigns, was particularly grueling, blending engineering, brute force, and strategic cunning, as attackers sought to breach fortifications while defenders employed countermeasures such as moats, walls, towers, boiling oil, and missile fire, turning every moment into a test of endurance, ingenuity, and courage, while exposure to projectiles, collapsing structures, fire, and environmental extremes added layers of physical danger that demanded rapid adaptation, coordination, and resilience from all participants. The prolonged nature of sieges, which could last weeks or months, amplified fatigue, malnutrition, and psychological stress, while attrition, disease, and supply shortages eroded the effectiveness and morale of both attackers and defenders, making survival itself a monumental challenge. Communication challenges in the field further complicated combat, as messengers, signals, horns, and banners were often misinterpreted, delayed, or ignored, creating gaps in understanding that could lead to misaligned attacks, exposure of flanks, or friendly fire. While the hierarchical structure of command required obedience, yet necessitated initiative when orders were unclear or impossible to execute, forcing soldiers to balance personal judgment with strict adherence to orders under extreme stress, a situation in which hesitation, misinterpretation, or impulsive action could have immediate and catastrophic consequences. Environmental and terrain factors further complicated strategy, as mountains, rivers, forests, deserts, and urban fortifications influenced movement, visibility, supply lines, and tactical choices, demanding that commanders and soldiers possess not only martial skill, but also adaptability, situational awareness, and the ability to exploit or mitigate terrain advantages. While environmental hazards such as heat stroke, hypothermia, flooding, and disease amplified the physical and psychological demands of combat, underscoring the interdependence of human capability, strategy, and the natural world in determining the outcome of engagements. The social dynamics of the army added yet another layer of complexity, as cohesion, trust, and morale were essential to executing coordinated maneuvers and sustaining effectiveness under fire, while rivalries, jealousy, or fear could undermine performance, amplify panic, or disrupt unit cohesion, highlighting the importance of leadership, communication, and mutual dependence in survival. Soldiers relied on comrades not only for protection and operational efficiency, but also for emotional support, guidance, and reinforcement of morale, creating bonds that were critical to enduring both the immediate violence of battle and the recumulative exhaustion of prolonged campaigns. The psychological toll of engagement was profound, as soldiers were forced to confront fear, the sight of death, injury and suffering, moral ambiguity, and the unpredictability of combat while maintaining focus, discipline, and courage, requiring extraordinary mental resilience and emotional regulation, as the consequences of failure were immediate, brutal, and irreversible, and even minor mistakes could cascade into catastrophic losses, collapse of morale, or defeat. Taken together, the combination of tactical complexity, physical exertion, environmental hazard, hierarchical obedience, social dynamics, and psychological strain made every engagement during the Crusades a crucible of human capability, endurance, and ingenuity, demonstrating that medieval warfare was as much a test of intellect, adaptability, and emotional fortitude as it was of martial skill, and providing a stark, unflinching insight into the brutality, unpredictability, and multi-dimensional challenges of combat in one of the most dangerous periods, where survival required extraordinary resilience, coordination, and courage in the face of relentless adversity. The aftermath of battle during the Crusades revealed the staggering human cost of medieval warfare, as soldiers, camp followers, and local populations confronted the immediate and long-term consequences of combat. From the carnage of the battlefield, littered with the dead and wounded, to the spread of disease, starvation, and psychological trauma, all compounded by the difficulty of burying the dead, treating injuries, and maintaining order in chaotic, often hostile environments. The sight, smell, and memory of death weighed heavily on participants, leaving deep psychological scars that persisted long after the cessation of fighting. As survivors grappled with guilt, fear, grief, and the moral ambiguity of actions taken under duress, from killing enemies and looting towns to witnessing or participating in atrocities, creating a pervasive sense of emotional exhaustion and moral complexity that was inseparable from the physical demands of recovery and continued survival. Casualties were staggering, with many soldiers succumbing not only to wounds but also to disease, infection, and exhaustion in the days and weeks following combat. As medieval medical knowledge was limited, sanitation poor, and supplies scarce, leaving even minor injuries to fester into life-threatening conditions, while amputations, infections, and chronic pain were common among survivors, profoundly affecting mobility, combat readiness, and quality of life, and forcing commanders to make difficult decisions about who could continue, who required care, and who might be left behind, highlighting the complex interplay of logistics, medical limitation, and human endurance in the post-battle environment. The psychological impact on survivors was equally profound, as the trauma of sustained exposure to violence, the loss of comrades, and the moral compromises inherent in warfare manifested in anxiety, depression, and hypervigilance, while the need to remain functional, obey orders, and prepare for subsequent engagements required extraordinary mental resilience, emotional regulation, and social support. Soldiers often relied on camaraderie, religious faith, and ritual to cope. Yet the cumulative burden of repeated exposure to death, suffering, and moral ambiguity left indelible marks on their mental and emotional health, shaping behavior, relationships, and decision-making in ways that modern observers might recognize as early forms of post-traumatic stress. Looting, pillaging, and scavenging after battle were necessary for survival, as armies often depended on the resources of the defeated for food, water, and equipment. Yet these acts carried moral and social consequences, exposing soldiers to ethical dilemmas, internal conflict, and potential disciplinary action, while simultaneously sustaining life, reinforcing hierarchy, and maintaining operational capability. The tension between survival, necessity, and moral responsibility created a psychological landscape as punishing as the battlefield itself, where individuals were forced to navigate the overlapping demands of obedience, pragmatism, and conscience. Commanders faced their own post-battle challenges as they assessed losses, redistributed resources, treated the wounded, maintained discipline, and prepared for the next engagement, while also managing morale, negotiating alliances, and addressing the psychological and social needs of their forces, highlighting the immense complexity of leadership under extreme stress, where every decision had immediate tactical implications and long-term consequences for both survival and cohesion. Environmental and logistical pressures further compounded the post-battle reality, as wounded and exhausted soldiers were exposed to disease, exposure, and hunger, while camps struggled to accommodate influxes of survivors and casualties, maintain sanitation, and secure sufficient food and water, creating conditions in which survival required constant vigilance, resourcefulness, and adaptability, even when physical and mental capacities were severely diminished. The interdependence of human resilience, social coordination, and environmental management was starkly apparent, as failures in any area could precipitate cascading crises. Social cohesion was critical, as soldiers relied on comrades for protection, emotional support, and practical assistance, while conflicts, jealousy, and hierarchy continued to influence behavior, emphasizing that the human dimension of warfare extended beyond the battlefield into every aspect of daily life, shaping both immediate survival and long-term psychological well-being, while fostering bonds of loyalty, solidarity, and mutual dependence that were essential for navigating the cumulative hardships of the Crusades. Over time, the repeated exposure to violence, suffering, and death reshaped perceptions of risk, morality, and human capability. As survivors developed adaptive strategies, coping mechanisms, and emotional resilience necessary to endure continued campaigning, while also experiencing the profound cost of sustained trauma, including grief, guilt, moral conflict, and desensitization to violence, highlighting the interplay between survival instinct, social cohesion, psychological adaptation, and moral negotiation, and providing insight into the extraordinary human capacity to endure prolonged periods of extreme adversity. Taken together, the aftermath of battle during the Crusades illustrates the brutal reality of medieval warfare, where physical injury, disease, environmental hazard, social complexity, and psychological strain combined to create an environment of relentless hardship, moral ambiguity, and profound human suffering, demanding extraordinary endurance, ingenuity, and resilience, and offering a stark, unflinching perspective on the cost of survival in one of the most dangerous, complex, and psychologically taxing periods of human history, where each soldier's fate was determined not only by skill and courage, but also by their ability to navigate the intertwined challenges of mortality, morality, and human endurance.